Hi, and welcome to episode 37. This is Bill Pendley, and this is Loans and Drones. And today I have a very special guest. In fact, he happens to be part of my family. David Pendley is here, and we've worked together, believe it or not, for what, 22 years?
20 long years.
20, yeah, they were long, weren't they? You know, we actually get along better now than we did when we were working together, too.
I think you quit 10 times and I fired you 10 times. But we
No, you
together.
fired me 15. Okay,
15.
let's just...
Okay, yeah.
So, no, we absolutely love my brother, by the way. So thank you for being my brother. But he's 13 years older than me, believe it or not. You know, I know I look older than him, but so it's just one of those things where I've always looked up to Dave, and he's been the person that's kind of helped me out through life and steering me in the right direction. A lot of times, we actually went to the same college, got in the mortgage industry. I think both of us didn't even really want to work together, but we felt the calling that somehow our family said, you're going to work together, and we wound up working together. So, Dave, I want to go back, and I really want to unpack the time capsule of Dave Pendley so everybody knows who you are. You are kind of, believe it or not, even though you're my brother, you are a little bit of a mystery. So I think if we can unravel some of this stuff to see how you got to where you are, go back to where you're a kid. Let's start there, and let's kind of piece it together from where you started and where you got into this crazy life of being a mortgage, like an owner of a company, and you became very successful in the industry. But let's start at age 8. I remember when you're 8 years old at the Baptist church.
Yeah. I was raised in Niles, Michigan. We spent the first 4 or 5 years in Chicagoland, and then through some family dynamics, my dad had to kind of recapture our family and put us on the right track. There were some things on their end that was creating a lot of disruption in our lives, and the move to Michigan was kind of like a peaceful kind of a restart. They became school teachers, and we moved in that direction. You came along when I was 13 years old, and so we've always had this interesting relationship that I coached your teams, and I kind of felt it was more like a father type of relationship. So we've always had that, and so it was a wonderful upbringing. We have one other brother who is a year and a half older than me, and he and I have a lot in common because we went through a lot of the similar experiences as young guys. But one thing that's always characterized me is I just always had this, some people are artists, some people are musicians, some people are athletes. I'm an entrepreneur. I just love the creative elements of business. I just know, even at a young age, I knew how to smell out a way to make a dollar. And so very young, I would go door to door and shovel driveways. And in the snow seasons, I, of course, had 2 paper routes. Two paper routes, a morning Chicago Tribune, the Niles Daily Star in the afternoon. And, anything to make a buck. That's what I was all about. And then when I was 15 and a half, I was able to be a busboy and work the restaurant business. And I've always equated our industry, the mortgage business, the real estate industry, very similar to the restaurant business. It's not about just getting it done. It's the overall experience that's important.
Yeah.
So that takes me up to going to college,
Well, so real quick. So you worked for one of our neighbors, Frankie Frusci. That's an old name. Like, that's what I love. Like, we had a person from Niles on last episode, and so I had the Burger Chef shirt on. I surprised her with it.
I saw that.
Yeah. So I mean, when you said that, all of a sudden, this is stuff where like it takes us back to where we were at Niles and growing up. And I remember Frankie living across the street and his big dog Sarge, and like. So that was where you kind of got the mindset of an entrepreneur, like just seeing like how the restaurant business worked.
Yeah, that helped put language to how I think many businesses should embody the experience, the wow factor, the overall essence of what we do is way beyond just giving a product or a service. So
that's cool.
I would see that. It's like when you go to a restaurant, the goal is not to get fed. The goal is the overall experience.
Yeah.
So when you read books like Uncommon Hospitality or other elements of the restaurant business, I always merge that with this. But But yeah, that was my foray into like the professional work world, where I actually had a W-2 and just loved it. Frankie's old school Italian guy, and he'd bring in all sorts of professional athletes. That's where I met Hank Aaron and Dan Devine and Era Park.
I was going to ask, because it was a great steak joint, wasn't it?
Italian restaurant.
Italian restaurant.
Yeah, just Italian. Yeah.
And I'm sorry to cut you off, but like I think there's a point, in a very pivotal point in your high school, that was like a game changer for you specifically, that somebody said to you, and it was a teacher. Like, because I remember Mr. Talley?
Yeah.
So he goes, he's the smartest, laziest person I've ever met in my life.
That would be me.
But you had as you're talking about this, you had the entrepreneurial mindset and skill. There's a lot of entrepreneurs that act the same way. They just, the education piece was kind of boring. You see Elon Musk, he was always looking out the window, and I feel like the teaching and the learning of kids needs to adapt to how they are, not how the system is. So when you were in school, and talk about the story that Mr. Crouch said to you, because I think that was a pivotal moment for you to actually go from like childhood not knowing, and then he showed you like your leadership skill right there in the spot, right?
A couple of years ago, my wife found my report card from my sophomore year of high school, and she looked at it. It had a 1.5 grade average, mostly D's.
That's actually pretty good.
Yeah. 1.5. And she looked at it. She's like, what the heck? And I'm like,
really?
That was me. But then we had this instructor who I highly respected, guy named David Crouch. I was in his class. I was a cut up. I was funny at the time or whatever. And so I was always just loose as a goose. And he talked about a shaman, what a shaman was. And a shaman is a primitive leader of a group. And he did a lot of wilderness excursions with people and so forth. And he said, does anybody in this class think they could lead us to survival if things got bad? And I, leaning back in my chair, hey, I could do it, no problem. And then he goes, looks at me, squares up, and I'm like, oh God, he's gonna break my legs. And he said, no, you could. If you ever wanted to, if you put your heart and mind to anything, you could do it.
Wow.
And I was waiting for the punchline. There was no punchline. That's how he left it. And I went from a 1.5 grade average to almost 4 point, leader on all the sports teams. It just changed me.
Wow.
Threw away the marijuana or whatever junk I was involved in, and just changed me. And then I went to college, and it gave me a confidence. About 20 years later, I wrote him a letter and thanked him. He died shortly after that, but just thanked him that, sometimes our throwaway comments or encouragement to just one person, you'll never know the impact it has, but It changed my life. It changed how I looked at myself. And it kind of, when I do sales training now, I hold a mirror up to people and go, this is who you are, man. You need to lean into this and embody it.
Yeah. Wow. What an amazing testimony. And just like you said, the pure, words that somebody said to lift you up as a kid that you probably weren't feeling, and you didn't feel valued. And now all of a sudden this person lifts you up and says, and by the way, the guy was a huge guy. So like, if you think he's going to break his legs, the guy could literally break his legs. Like he was like a heavy, what was he? A heavy like lifter?
Yeah, he was a weightlifter, man.
Geez, big. He was always chalking up, but a big guy. And I always regretted, one thing I regretted about my high school, because we went to the same high school, was not going on that wilderness trip. There's so many people that went fishing with Dave Crouch, and it was like they came back just changed. So you just tell that man was leaving a legacy just by pouring into those kids. I think that we need more of those people in our life.
Oh yeah.
And I see you actually doing that today. So you're kind of carrying the torch with the kids that you're working with right now, the young kids. So okay, so that got you into college. You started doing leadership in college. You were a RA at Central Michigan, which I went to Central Michigan, go Chips. Anything in college that changed you? I mean, well, let's back up. So, by the way, Dave I call him the cat with 9 lives, because he's had experiences, close to death experiences. How many times?
Half a dozen, maybe. Yeah.
Only half a dozen, right?
Yeah.
The first one was what? You had a throat closed up when you're early on.
Yeah.
And so they had to do some major surgery, otherwise he wouldn't survive that. And then in college, when we got to college, I remember like seeing Dave laid up in a hospital bed because he was on a softball team, intramural softball team, turning a double play, and then one of the guys slid underneath him and literally crushed his kidney to the point where he had to have surgery while he was awake. And like, you went from like what, 230 pounds, 240 pounds down to like 180 pounds because of this surgery. It was like one of those crazy experiences that nobody wants to imagine. That was one of them.
They had to remove my kidney, and the ambulance came right on the field. There was other things. I had heart surgery at 40. They took my heart out and fixed it and put it back in. And just, there were probably other things on motorcycles and stuff that were self-induced. But one of the, you're talking about perspective. I just had a talk with an employee about trying to shed a different perspective or a different light on a situation she's facing. But one of my experiences in college was I worked and lived in a funeral home. And my room was right next to the embalming room. And it just gave you perspective. And I always look at life like musical chairs. You don't know. We think we're all going to live to be 95 and die in our sleep. But when I worked in that funeral home and my job was to go pick up bodies, I realized we don't set that time, and it's like musical chairs in that we don't know when the music's going to stop for us, and there will not be a chair for us to sit down and it's time to remove. So I got a lot more serious on parts of my life because before that I was pretty reckless. Just like I said, motorcycles, fast cars, heavy partying, things like that, and just got a little more reflective. And then one thing that you and I both share, as well as my brother Mike, is our parents were not people of faith, but our grandparents were just little Southern Baptists in a little town in Buchanan, Michigan. And we just saw the reliance of Christ in their lives. And we always knew that was going to be an anchor for us someday. It's just when we could actually embody it and make it our own. And that's about the time I was like, okay, I got to figure this out, because I don't know when the music's going to stop for me. I always say we're going to be dead a lot longer than we're going to be alive. So let's get that right. Get that part right.
Good point.
We focus too much on this part, not, that moment someday.
There was a part of you on that table. Like you've had amazing, I think, testimonies about just interaction with God in certain points of your life. I mean, you've had visuals, and then you've also had like at that point when you were on the table and they're cutting you open, like what were you saying? What were you like?
The first thing I thought of was, man, I'm so glad I didn't stay in last night and study for the test. And I went to the bar with my friends. Dead serious.
Really?
I'm so glad if this is my last day, I'm glad I went partying with those guys.
No way.
Dead serious.
That was your first
instinct.
Interesting.
And then I thought, then I just like, when the doctor said, oh, blank, a swear word, when they cut me open, he's like, we got a problem. And I was like, oh, well, this just got a little more serious, And so then in my own way, I tried to pray, just like, Lord, what are we doing here? Is this it or not? And so, that was that. But I came out fine. And then college ended, and then we moved on. And what was interesting I tell young people this right now, in 1985, there weren't jobs. There were not jobs. I applied to McDonald's multiple times, didn't get it. I came out of college ready to rock and roll and steal the world and do amazing things. The best I could get was a Tombstone pizza driver where I had my own pizza truck and my little freezer in Niles, Michigan, where I was going to deliver pizzas, and I did not get the job. There were 40-something people who applied for this $19,000 a year job, and I didn't get it. And it was crazy how hard it was to get a job back then, any job. It wasn't about what's fulfilling, what will make me happy. Right. It was like, I got to pay some bills. I want beer money. I want car money.
Right.
So the only thing I could get was an all-commission job, hustling mortgages. They gave me $1,500 for 3 months, and then they said, you're on your own. Go find out. And in South Bend, Indiana is what I did. And so that's my foray into the mortgage business.
Yeah. Yeah, I remember those days. I mean, it's funny. You always crack up at my memory, but I remember you sitting at home, and Dave was very funny. I don't know. He got a little stern as he got older. Just kidding. He's still funny. But one of those things that he would sit there and do videos by himself with the big VHS cameras. So I think he was like one of the OGs of vlogging at the time with just doing comedy. So I respected that, but I also was going to start the intro with, I mean, you've earned your stripes with regards to being a general, I would say, in this industry, because people don't get into our world and last very long. Like, look at the last, 2021, we had 410,000 loan officers, and last year we just had 69,000 renew their licenses. Wow. So there's a huge fall off from 2020 to 2026, but even, and I was going to start this because I do remember those days where you were sitting at home and I was like, what is he sitting at home for? Like, he should be working, instead he's doing these crazy videos. There were funny videos though, by the way. We should pull those up.
They were hilarious.
We go on, that could be a whole episode. So, but I just remember that era in the 80s was like very difficult in landing a job, so the job industry getting a job was not easy at all.
The economy was completely upside down. And when you talk about mortgage rates at 13.5% and 14%, all of those, you had to pay 2 or 3 points to get that. It was hard selling, hard sledding, and when I got in it was really binary. It was either you are going to make it or you're going to fail. There wasn't like, I'm going to ride this out for you. I didn't have a choice. So I got on my horse and just hustled like crazy and got a few loans here and there. But it was good. It was a good training ground. And I always say when I train sales is you have to find your voice. Like, what is your voice? So it's kind of like public speaking. You got to find your ability to do it. And you might have to do it a dozen times before you lock in and you go, this is my rhythm. This is my vibe, and it's the same with sales. I had to find my voice, and there's a little bit of fake it till you make it, so for young loan officers. And so I'll teach them a little bit on how to act confident when you're scared to death,
Yeah.
So
what types of things would you do at the very beginning? Like, I mean, mind you, we didn't have, did you, at best, you maybe had a pager at that time? Or was there even, there wasn't even pagers. There was
no pager.
No pagers, no cell phones, right?
I did have a pager in the funeral home.
You did have a pager? Yeah, they had a pager.
Picked up Mr. Johnson at 301 North Maple Street. I'm like, okay, I'm done.
Pick up Mr. Johnson.
Yeah. But no, in the mortgage business, I take that back. I think we did have pagers back then. They were digital. Call this number, and you didn't know who it was. You call them up, go find a payphone.
Yeah.
Call them up. And, yeah.
So it wasn't like touch of a button like it is now. Like now I could get in front of like 340 people in a matter of one 30-second reel. But to do that back in the early days, you'd have to have you have to have Notre Dame Stadium kind of rented out, right?
In some ways it was easier, in some ways it was harder. It was easier because you walked in a real estate office and there'd be 35 agents staring you in the face.
Okay.
So you had free access to these 35 agents and you had to go win them over from your competition. So that part was great. Obviously that evolved to where there was nobody in the office, so now you got to go find them. So that's the part that's harder.
Yeah.
Social media and digital and everything else has changed it drastically. The key is when I do sales training, I always have a picture of a shoe, which represents you physically in front of somebody, and a phone, which means you're calling them and talking on the phone. I always say those are your highest octane calls in sales. And it's what nobody wants to do, but it'll get you the highest result,
Would you say that you were in those days where you had to be an extrovert to win business? Or because I think the difference between today and back in the day, because I remember going out and it was like a ghost town, like going out with, remember the nobody on signs? We'd go out with nobody on signs looking like, right. Hey, put this in your lawn, man. This will help us get leads. And you're in front of agents all the time. You're physically in front of agents. But I think an introvert, no offense to introverts in this industry, but I think you can actually be successful because you can hide behind a camera. I just think that can be a little easier at times. Yeah. But back in the day, did you think that the extrovert had to be number one? as far as personality trait?
I think it helps. I saw introverts make it in this business. I had a loan officer who had a significant degree of Tourette's who was very successful in this business, which
Really?
is just crazy. But
Interesting.
I think the biggest thing is courage, where you will do hard things to make it. You'll outlast it. That binary, like, I'm either going to make it or I'm not, so there's a little bit of stubbornness. Sometimes the extroverts, they go out and they flame out, because they can't deliver the goods, so to speak, and administratively and things like that,
Yeah.
But it helps. Obviously, it helps to have great social skills and be, want to be the life. You're way more outgoing than I am. So when I sold, I was like, I'm not looking for friends. I just want your mortgages, So that was a little more choleric, if you will. I would drive right to what's the quickest way to write loans with these people, If they want to go to lunch, we'll go to lunch, but I don't want to go to lunch,
That's one thing you always crack up about with you. He's like, I don't want to go to lunch. I just want your deal. Like, let's just be honest. Like, I got plenty of friends, and sometimes I don't even like my friends. So,
sometimes organically they become your friends.
Yeah.
I had a female realtor, wonderful woman. She called me the next day when her husband committed suicide. We were that close.
Oh yeah, I remember that. Yeah.
And that we helped. I think I was helpful to walk the family through that. We way transcended business. So there organically, there's friendships that evolve.
Sure.
It's just not, that's the end. That's not the goal,
Right.
It happens, but that's not the goal. The goal, is to write mortgages.
Crack me up. Okay, so let's get into. So you went. So you were. Was it Providence? Was that the company's
The old
name?
bank out of Boston, Provident.
Provident?
Oldest charter savings loan in America. Yeah, they had a little branch in South Bend, Indiana.
Yeah, are they still around or no?
No, long gone. Got bought by somebody.
Yeah, that's interesting. There's a lot of companies that you hear names of, like, in the past, like Countrywide, all these other companies. They're just not there because one thing or another, they had to leave the industry. And a lot of it's because there was just mismanagement of staying in the black, and from that point, you learned a business, and then you decided to go, I can do this. I can run a company. Let's talk about that point in your life and how you got to creating Avenue Mortgage.
Yeah, I was at Provident, ended up moving to Chicago during this time. So I did this business in Chicago. They ended up closing down Chicago. I joined a little broker there and working with about a half a dozen other guys there, guys and gals. And we started getting our paychecks bouncing. And so on payday back then, they would hand you the paycheck on Friday or whatever. And we'd all kind of like slyly sneak out to rush to the bank to see if we can get my check to go through, So
Really?
I was like, that's how down and dirty it was. And so my father was coming in that weekend with my mom, and we were in Oak Park, Illinois. And I can remember the restaurant we were sitting at, and I was telling him this problem. And he said, have you ever thought of starting your own company? I'm 23 years old. I'm like, no, not really. I mean, yeah, I'd like to, but I don't have the wherewithal or anything like that. And it's just crazy to think of it now. I know what their financial situation was at the time. He literally lent me the last 15 grand he had for me to start this business. And we wrote up a little note, pay you back in this time frame, whatever. He said, go for it. I went and got licensed by the Savings and Loan Commissioner in the state of Illinois. And thankfully, by God's grace, I was able to pay him back in 6 months, but I know that drained his account. He made a big investment, a big risk on me. But we started this little company called Avenue Mortgage, and I was the first and only employee, and then a couple others and more. And then over the course of the years, we probably employed, several hundred people at different times, but total, I should say. But really at any given time, there was 30 to 50 people that worked there. We had 4 or 5 branches at one time, and ran that all the way through 2013. But I had kind of a pivotal moment during running this company, and this is kind of defines how I do business. I was teaching a lot of Bible. I was leading some Sunday school classes and a little bit of, more speaking and things like that. And I kind of felt as a Christ follower Christian, I backing up just out of college. I had recommitted my life to Christ and it changed everything. But I said, well, gosh, if I'm a Christian and I want my life to count, I need to go into vocational ministry. I have to be a pastor or a missionary, or one or the other. That's the only way you can. Otherwise, everything else is superficial. And so I went to Moody Bible Institute graduate school while I was running this business, and pursued a Master's of Arts in Biblical Studies. And right about the time I was winding down with that degree, I had the heart problem and some other things with my life. But during that time, God made it clear that, whoa, I've called you to be a businessman. This is the creative element that I've put inside of you. This is how you're going to dance. And this is where I want you to shine and be a light for me in business. And so I looked at my business career after that completely different, more strategic, more pastoral, more looking for people who might need, who are hurting or need some help or some guidance. And as now I'm like the oldest guy in most rooms. I love helping young people, love helping them when they have questions about parenting or their marriage or business or whatever. So I went back, continued to run Avenue Mortgage, my company. We were wildly successful, even through the mortgage meltdown and everything else. It was a great company, but I felt called to sell it. And so I sold it in 2013.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. There you go.
You were part of that.
Yeah.
And, that was a tricky deal. I went out and bought two $1,000 suits at Nordstrom's. I had to go sell my company. So I was meeting with all these CEOs, board members of banks, mostly banks. So I thought we'd be a great fit for a bank because we were a super clean company. And met with 10 of them. 10 of them were ready to go for it. Let's do this. But we had to find the right fit. And so we found what I believe is the right fit. It probably is, because they're still going today, 13 years later. Sold the company, worked there for 5 years after that, which is probably 3 years too long after a sale. It was time for me to go, but I had a stiff non-compete. I couldn't get out of there, but they're thriving. Mm-hmm. They've been a good company. And so I sold it and took another route.
Yeah. Yeah. And then you went to in the credit. So you started out as a broker. And explain to people that may not know what that difference is, because I think that's where the success grew for you. And I think you always, when I first came on, and this is back in the year of 2000 or 1999, 2000, you never wanted to get bigger than like 4 or 5 loan officers. You liked kind of flying under the radar as a business owner. And I at the time, I'm like, why don't you just explode into like this big metropolis type of like entity? And you had a wisdom that was far greater than I could ever imagine. That I just thought, go big, go as big as you can, all or nothing, right? But looking back, I mean, it was actually probably the funnest time that I ever had, because we had a nice small company. You didn't have the radar, like you didn't have people like targeting you as much, but then when you get bigger and bigger, your voice, like you said, gets bigger and bigger too. People start looking and go, what are they doing? Let's check and see, make sure it's legit. And so you see a lot of these. I remember seeing, back in the crash, that you had manila envelopes coming across from some of these banks. Just hard times. It wasn't an easy time for a business owner back in those days. That's why I said you earned stripes, because you got through the 80s being a loan officer in a crazy market where you're charging 2 points for 13%. Then you get to 2008, and all of a sudden these banks are coming back saying, why don't you buy back this loan? And I felt like it was a David and Goliath, no pun intended with your name, but David and Goliath story from start to finish. So you started out with you as being the individual, and then you forgot to mention that your wife was part of that too. So she was also hired on. So you guys were running this almost like it was like a Jimmy Stewart movie, right? Like you're showing up with the tour with the bread and the wine. It was like a wonderful life situation. So what, like going back and kind of rewinding a little bit, like how did what would you ever done it over again, like the way that you did it, or is there certain things you would change? I mean,
Obviously there's things that I would change, subtle things, but at 23 or 24, you're just ignorant. You're like, you don't know. You didn't know. People
sorry, Chris.
oh, no.
I'm just
Ignorant meaning not stupid. Ignorant means lacking the information or knowledge of
Yeah.
what you're doing.
Right.
And I didn't think it was risky at all. I knew it was going to work. And my wife finally came about a year later. She came and worked for me. So we got these two 24-year-olds at the time running this business. And she was the toughest boss I've ever had. I'd come back and she goes, "You smell like golf." And I'm like,
you smell like golf.
I'm like, no. I was at the office supply store. Whatever. But
There just happened to be a golf range right next door.
when you look, but those were great days. Just she and I, and we had other family members who joined later. You, of course, and Sally, and some others. But those were great times. But I do a lot of consulting now, and when people are ready to start a business, I tell them, you can own it, or if you're not careful, it will own you. Especially when you look at things like debt and what type of risk element there is to your business. So be prepared for that. Because if it owns you, it can exact a toll on your life. And we had two little girls, probably in their late 20s, about 30. We had kids, and I'm like, I wanted to be present for them, at least physically. Sometimes mentally I wasn't. The shift from broker, where you're just using other people's money, there's very little risk. You're an intermediary, to a banker, where I went to Hinsdale Bank and Trust and said, "Hey, I want a credit line. I want to become a banker." I got licensed to be a banker. They literally asked you to put up a decent chunk of money, and then they gave me a $20 million credit line. So that is like, you're all in at the poker table, So I fund your guys' loans. Like, here's 15 million. Go close those loans, boys. And then you close them and bring them back to me. I'm like, crap, I got to go sell these. I got to go sell them to Chase and BOA and Wells and Citibank and all this stuff. And that's when, after the meltdown, they would come after you on loans that were performing great for 5 years, and they finally tanked, and they'd want me to buy them back. And I had to defend those. And I asked them, I said, "Why are you coming after me so hard?" And they said, "Because you're the only guy still standing." There's an old website that's still up. It's called Implodometer, that it probably has 300 to 500 companies on there that imploded during this time. I mean, companies that are bigger and better than ours, they imploded, but somehow we survived it. By God's grace, we survived all that. Had no buybacks. I fought them all, won them all, but it was eating me up. It was just chewing me up. And I was really like, this isn't going to go away. And so I kind of had to do a reset. So that's why I decided to sell the company.
Yeah.
And it was hard. Actually, the hardest thing I've ever been through in my life, hands down, more than any of the physical stuff or surgeries or whatever, was after selling this company. I had the big party. You probably remember the party we had, and the wire hit, and I'm like, "Yay, this is awesome." And whatever. Within about 24 to 48 hours, I went into a deep, 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 dark depression. And
really,
I couldn't sleep. I went 4 or 5 days, like zero sleep. I'm taking all his highest, powerful sleeping meds, still can't sleep. And I just felt like there was a part of me that died there. And I finally, for the first time in my life, to get some professional help and say, "Well, what's going on?" And he explained what happened and what's happened in brain chemistry and all this stuff. He goes, "We got to reset you." And thankfully I went to the right person, and a month or two later, I was back on my feet, ready to go. But I'd walk into the office with all the employees, and I'd look in the mirror and go, "Can they see this?" I'm like, "Oh, they can't." And then, I'm like, "Hey, how's the golf swing? How's the wife? How's this?" And I go in my office and cry, it just changed who I was. And there's that creative element of an entrepreneur. It's just the fight. All of a sudden I'm working for a bank, a publicly traded bank, with FDIC restrictions and everything else. And I just felt like, back to the analogy of the creative dancer, I lost the dance floor. I lost the ability to do it. It's like, and I was stuck there for a couple of years. I'm like, I don't know how to get out of this thing, man.
Jeez.
So that was the toughest thing, because I've never been depressed in my life. I understand it now. I thought depression was a perspective. It's not. It's a physiological turning of the brain that's hard to get back. So
would you say that is probably what happens to a lot of the type A CEOs of companies, that you hear the story of guys running a huge company, and all of a sudden retires, and then 2 years later is dead? Is that kind of you think that that's probably what it like? It's almost like the marriage that is beautiful for years and one spouse dies and the other follows. Is that kind of what you felt?
Yeah, it sure is. And here's how weird I am. I mean, after that, I just needed to be creative with business. I'm like, how do I make money? How do I do something creative? And so I think you remember I started flipping trucks. Like I'd buy trucks down south that were 4-wheel drive, ship them up, or go fly down there, grab them, and drive them up, and I'd sell them up. And I didn't need the money. I just needed. That was a little mini business. I just needed to do something outside of the framework of a boring, dusty old bank.
I remember that. I remember him walking out one time. He's got this big wad of cash. I'm like, "What are you doing?" He's like, I'm flipping a truck." I'm like, "What? What does that mean?" And then the other one was he would buy some of these in these shady areas in Chicago. And I remember going down with his daughter. He's like, "Hey, can you drive? I need you to drive me down to this area
and cover me."
Yeah. And like, I'm gonna buy this truck cash. I'm like, "Where at?" He goes, "South side of Chicago." I go, "What? Why?" He goes, "Because I got a deal on it." So he goes and buys this truck. I'm down there, keep my head below the steering wheel. And Elizabeth was with us too, I think. And then we're sitting there, we get the money and nothing crazy happens. But what a wild ride.
There's something I've met with a small college recently, and I would love to teach a course on entrepreneurship and kind of put language to what it is. So that select percentage of young people who have this gene of entrepreneurship, they can lean into it and develop it and learn certain skills. And some skills are intuitive too, like just a gifting of ability to do that. But a lot of it's not taught in colleges because it's
not at all.
You don't hear about that. That's something like esoteric or out there or whatever. It's not something that's taught, but
it's not part of the system. The system that's being ran.
And the world has changed so much, as you all know, and it's going to change more in the next 36 months than probably the last 20 years. But this creative resourcefulness or resiliency of entrepreneurship is going to be foundational for these young people to make it, because you no longer can you find a company and work there for a decade or 20 years and go, they're going to take care of me if I do my job right. No, it's going to be way too dynamic. And your job could be AI'd out or whatever. And we have 2 daughters, 27 and 29 now. They're both they got this gene, wired up. Some of the things they've done, it's amazing how young people can make money apart from some company, being reliant on just a company.
Yeah, I completely agree. I think I've had some people on the show, Rashawn Boone, he's an awesome agent. And he has a summer kind of class for kids where he takes them on a bus and has them dress up and shows them what real estate world is, and like also teaching them how to become entrepreneurs. And with his own family, he created a business for his kids, just a small little business, so they can learn how to do business as an entrepreneur. And I think that that's something that somebody like yourself who's gone through, become successful. In training that into today's, youth is huge. I think it's something that I definitely would encourage you to do, because, I mean, I think with the way the AI is moving, the way the technology is moving, it's kind of substituting their actual thought process. So they're becoming more dependent on that. And that's the fear for AI, is that these kids aren't reading books. They're trusting what AI is saying or whatever. But to have somebody like yourself to teach the actual learning piece of the entrepreneurial skill is huge, because it won't take over then.
Just to touch on the AI thing, I love it. I use it. It's phenomenal to me. It's bigger than the internet, hands down. It'll be the biggest innovation in my lifetime. The negatives are it's replacing this God-given ability to think. There's things that just to think through a process. And I see a lot of young people, I do it too. Somebody throws something at me, hang on, let me check. It's my brain first. And I'm like, no, it can't be that. And that's, they're talking about, right now the connectivity to this is our phones. They're talking about actually a physiological connection to our neocortex, where it's going to be surgically implanted. And that's how we're going to adjunct or draw information from this source. It's distasteful to me, to going that far. But But to be able to think and to be able to think through problems and be a live, breathing human being and to have an emotional intelligence where you care about others and things like that, that's the part that's would be a shame to be displaced.
Mm-hmm.
But back to this entrepreneurship, that resiliency of creating your own economy. My two daughters, one's education track and the other one's business in New York City. I believe I've said this for 10 years. I could drop either of them off in any city with no money, no nothing. In 30 days, they'd be thriving. And that's
wow.
That's how they've been, and
Did you raise them that way?
I think that's just part of it. It's just some of the DNA from me, like God's, gifting. And then they saw mom and dad. I tell young people, man, don't shoot here. I mean, shoot for the stars. I mean, you just go for it. This is your one life. And you don't know how, once again, musical chairs, you don't know how long your life's going to, you might as well just go for it.
Right.
And I watched our girls, they just, they just shock me. Hey, Dad, guess what? I got into Harvard. I'm like, what? Pendleys don't go to Harvard. We're community college people. We're C+ people. And she sailed through and doing amazing things there. The other one's on her second IPO in New York City. Moved there at 19, all on her own dime, just killing it in business, way smarter than mom and dad will ever be as far as that stuff. But there's an element of wisdom that goes, that's one thing AI doesn't. AI doesn't have common sense and AI does not have wisdom. So that's where.
That's a good point. Last question, do you think that, with regards to this, do you think that entrepreneurship can be trained or are you just automatically born with it?
I think it's back to dance or golf. Let's use golf just to get off the dance thing. But golf, athletic people who have an intuition towards that. You were one of the best athletes I've ever seen in my life. I'm dead serious. If your body didn't break down, you could have done anything you wanted in sports. But golf, you're not great because you haven't been trained. You know what I mean? You haven't learned the fundamentals of hitting a golf ball. You're functional, you do fine, but you're not shooting 70. And if you were trained, no problem. You would be highly skilled. And I'd say the same thing with the entrepreneurs, people with the instincts that I was born with. Somebody needed to lean into it at about 17, 16. Let's teach you Excel. Let's teach you this. Let's get you started on some kind of business. Let's generate some revenue. Let's teach you what a balance sheet, how to read an income statement, things like that. Let's learn certain vernacular. Let's read some good books.
Yeah.
Built to Last, Good to Great, John Lewis, all these books that you just need to be reading. Read Stephen Jobs' book, But, I bring up Stephen Jobs, obviously he changed the world. He's still changing the world even though he's gone. But David Isaacson's book, at the end, you can tell Jobs was highly reflective and said, I didn't get it right. I missed this relational part. I missed the caring part. I missed the loving part. I missed being a good dad, a good husband, things like that. It's the convergence or the confluence of both the emotional intelligence and the caring and the love with the technical ability as well as the engine that God gave you in your heart to be an entrepreneur.
Yeah.
I could naturally in my own self, I could run over people and just be destructive. And I always say there's two plans in life, your plan and God's plan. One's way better,
Yeah, that's good. Yeah, and you're one of those people that there's certain people in my life that I hear them speak and I just won't forget what they say. And you're one of those people. So, and I think that's when you're seeking wisdom, you always seek wisdom through people and filter what you hear. Because I think, like you said, God's speaking to you in many ways. And I think he brings those people in your life. And Dave was one of those people in my life. And in fact, Dave, that you led me to Christ early on. So when I think it was 8, right? You were back from college. So 13 years. So that's when I committed my life to Christ. And then obviously after that, I recommitted because of being, later in life, going into Naperville and going into church there. But yeah, that's just awesome that you have that mindset and the story you have. I think that there's so much more that we could probably unpack because there's just a lot to you, So, but I think the pivotal point in your life that really sticks out is the David Crouch moment where you went from not believing yourself and then somebody spoke into your life and then boom, it just, the rest was history. So it gave you kind of life there. Okay. So from here, we're going to go into the speed round of 3 questions that I always ask our I don't want to say clients, you're not a client, but our podcast interviewees.
Okay.
So let's start with this one. If you could have, excuse me, if you could have lunch, dinner, or speak with anybody in the entire world, whether they be alive or someone from the past, who would you speak to? Who would you have lunch with right now?
Hands down, Bill Hybels.
Bill Hybels.
Bill Hybels was
I was not expecting
he
that.
was my pastor at Willow Creek. He was if I had a hero, which I did have a hero, he's my hero. Learned so much from him on leadership and obviously biblically and so forth. And then he had a terrible fall. He's crashed and burned, unlike a lot of pastors. And I see him on a boat in Saugatuck often, to be honest, looking a little disillusioned. And I just want to know what's going on in his head. He was the most accessible leader. You could pull him up on any podcast tapes, whatever. He was everywhere, to being nowhere. And I just see this mountain of a man who wrecked his life, and I just would like to talk to him. Like, what are you feeling, man? Like,
yeah,
so it'd be Bill Hybels. Yeah.
Wow. Okay.
I love the guy, and it broke my heart when I was there the day he walked off the stage at Willow Creek for the very last time. And
You were there.
I was there, man.
Wow. Huh. How was that when you, like, what do you do? Like, was it like a resignation or like a...
He'd been confronted on some things. He decided instead of owning it or whatever, he would hasten or expedite his retirement.
Gotcha.
So the family walked up there. They had to be the people standing behind him, all sheepish, and they all walked off the stage, and that was it. And after that, you never heard the guy ever speak again, both in writing form or whatever. But I see him all the time. I live in Holland, Michigan.
Yeah.
We boat up there all the time, and I see him on the back of his boat. And
you ever go up to him and talk to him?
No.
Why not?
I don't know.
Well, I'm gonna come up there this summer. We're gonna go hunt Bill. We're gonna go because you, like, literally, that was another. I remember that. Like, you got baptized at his church.
He baptized me.
He baptized you.
He baptized.
Okay,
me,
so
yeah.
he baptized you at the church, and you see him, but you feel like you can't approach him.
Yeah,
very.
A lot of times you find this with your heroes in life. You'd almost like to keep them where they are. You don't want to.
Michael Jordan said the same thing.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, we've seen Jordan up close, but you're almost afraid to talk to him in case he gives you the brush off. Part of you would have to die.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow. All right. I wonder Bill, if you're listening, maybe we'll send this in an email to you so you can listen to this, because
I'm your guy, man. Reach out.
It just tells you, wow, what a interesting. Okay, I wasn't expecting. I was thinking you were going to go to the cliche Jesus.
Yeah.
Which would be awesome.
I meet with him every day. But
very good point.
Point.
Okay, so let me think. What is? I think I probably asked you this before. What's your favorite food? It's very simple. Maybe
just really, really good pizza, man.
Pizza.
Yeah, at my age and my current girth situation, I eat it very infrequently, but a really good pizza.
Where's a shout out to a company over? Is there a certain place?
Nothing in West Michigan.
Nothing in West Michigan.
No. I'm back in Chicago, man.
You like Chicago? You like Chicago pizza better?
Or some of the downtown places.
What about Lou Malnati's? You like Lou Malnati's?
Oh yeah. So just a quick little side note: Catherine Robbins. She worked for me. She was a dear friend of mine. Still hang out with her and her boyfriend all the time. They did the top 50 pizza places in Chicago, and they profiled the Chicago Tribune and everything
really?
else. Yeah, so it'd be a good read sometime. But Catherine Robin, look it up, pizza, and she'll tell you what the best little mom and pop pizza places are in Chicago.
See, that's funny because we're in St. Charles, and that's the number one question I ask everybody. I'm still trying to find the pizza place. I think I found it. I'd say it's Riverside Pizza. Pretty decent. I mean, it's just your Detroit style. Like, I like the pan. So, but over in Southwest Michigan, I do like Silver Beach.
Oh yeah, that's really good.
Silver Beach pizza. Right. They got a different sauce, and it's actually a cash cow. If you ever go to St. Joe, Michigan, Silver Beach Pizza, there's two reasons I love it. One, the pizza is amazing, and you can get it really fast. And people are like at the beach right there picking up boxes of pizza and taking it to their beach. And then the other thing is they have schooners. I love this. For some reason, it's all about the presentation of the schooner, but the frosted schooners of beer.
Those are good.
Every time they're good.
I've heard.
I've heard very, very good things about the schooners and the pizza. All right, so let's think. If you could, I'm going to do another meet. So if you could meet either future family or past family, who would it be? Like, is there somebody that you'd want, like, you know what I'm talking about? Like,
Yeah. No, I'd like to.
future generations or past generations. Where would you go?
I just have to go back because
Really?
I'm a genealogy guy.
Yeah.
I've done all the research on our family and everything else. And our great grandfather was a guy named Peregrine White, who was born on the Mayflower, sitting in that bay waiting to come ashore for a couple months. But he was born there. He lived to be like 91.
Really?
And just a tremendous man of faith. You can Google his will and his last will and testament. He gave away his beehive and his chair and all, like his handful of worldly possessions. They
Yeah.
bestow these to you, And,
Yeah.
But he was just a tremendous man of faith. And through our family, there was just a lot of really amazing people. But that was, we got some
Peregrine-
characters too.
Yeah, we do.
Really.
Peregrine White. Peregrine?
Peregrine.
Peregrine.
Yeah, just like
a
the
grin.
bird, peregrine.
Oh, peregrine. Okay.
Yeah, Peregrine White. Only person born on the Mayflower. Most of them died. For some reason, he made it to 90 or 91, something like that. So I would have
Give me
loved
hope. You're giving us hope, right? Or
that.
like,
Yeah.
wow, that's awesome. Yeah, that would be cool. And we also had, I always make a joke of this. My wife always goes, stop it. I'm like, I say I'm 132nd Indian. So we have Indians too. So I'm always like making a joke. Like,
We own it.
yeah, Pilgrims and Indians got together on a Thanksgiving, had a really fun time. But, yeah. So we have a great great grandmother that was, or a great grandfather,
Full-blooded Cherokee.
full-blooded
Yeah.
Cherokee. That's it.
Yeah,
Cherokee.
yeah.
Okay. So I wasn't wrong. I thought maybe it was Sue or something. But well, either way, Dave, it's been a pleasure. I mean, I always say this, and you guys will always crack up with me. We're gonna have you on again, okay? So we absolutely had a great time. I thank you so much for joining us, and we'll see you on the next episode of Loans and Drones. Have a good day.
What the